Wow. We're coming off of cracking up just trying to get to this topic. And today we're talking about the possibility in choosing joy. So excited to be here with you. I'm Chani and I'm here with Rivky. And we are going to drop into joy, joy, joy. It's the month of joy. And it's really coming to a deep awareness that joy is something that we choose. It's not necessarily that, it's not like floating in the air and we just like tap into it. It's a choice to notice, it's a choice to engage, it's a choice to indulge in it and to be in fitfuls of laughter, which is what we're coming from. So, hey, what's up?
Hi, Honey. Okay. Well, the first thing I want to talk about when I think about choosing joy is something my very wise friend, Honey Frankel, once told me, which is I'm choosing to live a more interesting life. And the word that that line brings me to is adventure. And there's something about adventure that's not always as comfortable as the status quo, but it leaves room for surprises and for even more delight than choosing to live a mundane life. And there's something I feel so passionate about in adventure. And there's something so the opposite of a fearful life or a constricted life or an inhibited life in the word interesting, right? It's like choosing the roads uncharted. It's going into uncharted territory. It's creating new possibilities for ourselves, which is literally what this podcast is called and all about, the possibilities in the universe and expanding our tunnel vision from a trauma based perspective, which is when we see things in tunnel vision, to a expansive, more healing perspective where there's room to see so many more possibilities and to try so many more things in life. So that's where I want to begin.
Okay. First of all, I want to give credit where credit is due. So that line that I use all the time of choosing to live the more interesting life is actually from the book called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. That is a fantastic read and I highly recommend it. And when I read that line, I resonated with it so deeply because I was like, hey, that's me. I feel seen in my life experience and recognizing that getting by with the mundane is just not the way I navigate. And the more risky and the more fun and the more adventure is the way that I choose. And because of that, live in the life experience that I live in. And it's pretty wild. But actually, when we were talking about this topic, I was trying to think about a time where I chose not to choose joy. Because choosing joy actually kind of comes easy to me because it's so fun to have fun and I love to have fun. So let's just have fun. And I went back to a time where I was probably about like 14 years old and there was some poor lacking planning for our Holocaust trip, which is during the Jewish holidays. There's the days that we observe, and then there's the days in between that are still considered a holiday, but it's usually a time to have fun with family and go on a trip or whatever it is. And we didn't plan anything, and it was like pretty lame. And my dad decided to drive out to this airfield where some people were flying planes like with remote controls. So it was like kind of like remote control flying planes thing. And I didn't really know where we were going until I got into the car. And then once I got in, understood that that's what we are doing. And I was pissed. Okay, I was 14 years old. That was not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something else, anything but this. Humph. I was not gonna have it. And so I chose to not choose joy. I chose to protest. I chose to, when we showed up there and everyone got out of the car, to not enjoy myself, to not go outside in the nice, beautiful breeze that was happening inside, and chose to stay in the stuffy car and suffer. And not to make the choice to just be like, dude, we're here anyways. Just make the most of it. It's cool. And I was so actively in discomfort by the choice that I knew that I'm making that's making me suffer, but I just couldn't not do it because I also said that I'm not going to. There was like an ego part of myself that was like, oh yeah? Well, I'm just gonna stay in the car. Yeah, guess what? Guess who's suffering when you're staying in the car? Nobody else but you, honey. You're the one in the stuffy car. And so it was just like interesting to consider how much it is a choice in both directions, really. It's I'm in this car, I can choose to get out of the car, even if it's not exactly what I wanted to do, but it's probably pretty fascinating if I can get behind it, and I'm still with my family, and it's still outside, and it's a gorgeous day. Or I could just say, humph, cross my arms, be in this pissed off mood, and stay in that pissed off mood because the only way to get out of it is to step out of it. But I was choosing to stay in it. And that was me choosing to suffer.
I'm sure so many people of so many different ages and stages could resonate with that story of choosing to suffer because something that we desire is not going our way or isn't the way that we want it to be. And also, like in honoring trauma the way that it deserves, sometimes we don't even feel like we're choosing to suffer. Sometimes because of what we went through as a child or an adult, it can feel like it isn't a choice. And sometimes we, as humans, create almost like a shrine to our suffering. It's like in order to remember how bad it's been, we unconsciously recreate patterns to feel the same thing again, to validate something that we may have went through that didn't feel good.
Yeah.
And there's even a pattern in which people have unconsciously where it feels good unconsciously, not nobody's choosing this on purpose, mostly feels good, it feels vindicative, it feels validating, it feels comfortable, it feels safe to feel bad. So there's
Mhm.
something that I see sometimes in my clients. There's something that feels good about staying stuck in the muck, something that feels good about staying stuck in the mud. There's something that feels safe about staying in the metaphorical car and crossing our arms rather than opening up our arms to the adventure of what the world is. And in the possibility of the universe, we're really talking about the possibility in choosing and expanding our vision for what's possible beyond the trauma which shapes our subconscious, which then in some way and in many ways shapes our reality, where we end up being 14 in the car when everyone's having fun. So I'm really happy that you shared that story because I feel like it's so juicy to feel that energy. And I can feel it in myself. I know when I do that 14-year-old sitting in the car with my arms crossed. And the more I think about that energy, the more I can make it conscious. And there are some simple ways that I want to first begin talking about to help shift our vessel, to help shift our body, to help shift our reality from a tunnel vision, from a contracted consciousness to an open and expansive consciousness, literally in physical ways. So I want to go through some of them. Number one being music. Music
Yes.
is such a paradigm shifter. We could be in a contracted consciousness and listen to music, and it can really shift our timeline. It could take us to a different frequency, it could take us to a different dimension, and it could take us to a completely different place. And sometimes I feel like these things that I'm about to share are so simple that we underestimate them
Hmm.
and we don't use them. So the encouragement to use them. Rabbi Nachman, who is a very wise rabbi, says that a sigh can shift our vessel. A sigh, clapping our hands, shifting our embodiment, moving from a contracted, and if you're watching on Zoom, you see me contracting my body tighter, tighter, contracted to opening.
Mm.
Sometimes, in order to feel all the flavors of life, which is one of them being joy, we need to feel all the flavors of life. And sometimes the portal to joy is grief or anger or sadness. Because what joy really is choosing joy is choosing to be with what is as it is when it is
Yeah.
without resistance. And sometimes the way to get there is through the thing that we're resisting. And the way out is truly through, and the way out is truly in. So going inside and really being able to see what is in the way of the joy is usually the way.
Oh,
Um,
it's making me think of Matam was having a time for a little while that he was having these bad dreams. And I was trying to empower him with different ways to help himself. And I told him about Rabbi Nachman
mm.
and this idea of clapping and how that shifts the energy. So when he'd wake up in the middle of the night from a bad dream, I would hear him in the other room just clapping away. He was just clapping because he was just working towards moving energy and like getting different thoughts in the space. And it was cool. It was really cool that he first of all, that he's 5 years old and he resonated with it. He's like, oh, I get that. You clap and things move, energy moves, things shift. And I believe in that. And that he was utilizing it as a tool to help himself to shift his energy, going from a place that was of suffering, right? Of like limited tunnel vision is something that seemed scary and seemed like he was stuck in, to be able to move the energy and open up the space and bring more possibility into his own bedtime, into his own little head that really was helping him. It's really, really cool. It really works, is what I'm trying to say. It really
The
works.
little 5-year-old energy worker.
Yeah.
So adorable. I'm just
Yeah.
imagining him like
He's like feverishly clapping and clapping, like so cute.
yeah, and the portal to joy is through feeling, because the portal through feeling we can get present. And the formula that I think about is feel what you feel when you feel it, so that you can have what you have while you have it.
I love that. Can you say it again?
And
Say it again.
feel what you feel when you feel it, so
Yes.
that you can have what you have while you have it. And I tell that to myself all the time inside of my head. Rivky, feel what you feel when you feel it, because everything passes. And studies show that if you feel a feeling to the bottom of the feeling, it passes through you after 90 seconds. And that's what we resist. Those 90 seconds of pure feeling is what we resist. And what we resist persists. And what we allow flows through us. And then we can return over and over and over again to presence and gratitude and joy. And somebody recently told me that somebody else asked her, I don't understand. Like, is Rifki always happy? And I was laughing. Like, it's just like projections are so, there and available all the time. But I told my friend, I said, in many ways, I feel a lot of joy, but it's because I feel a lot of everything. And I ran a breathwork group last night, and the woman in the group told me, she said, I've never seen a practitioner who works so like hard. Like you're really, really so present. You're moving energy. You're really, really, really taking that space and transmuting and transforming, she said. But I can see how you're allowing each feeling to pass. You cry with us, you laugh with us, you scream with us, but I can see how you're allowing each feeling to move through you so fully that I can see that you feel clear at the end. And it's true. It's
Yeah.
true. And when I've learned how to transmute feelings, I've learned the true experience of joy. And everyone who's came to any of my retreats know what that feels like. That feeling of exhilaration beyond catharsis. It's not like, oh, I just cried and then I feel good. No, it's like I moved a tremendous amount of energy, which then leaves space for my life force energy to be inside of my body. And I have certain practices where I have this like little corner in my house with a bunch of plants. I have plants all over my house, but this little corner in my house with some plants. And sometimes when I'm feeling a feeling passing through, I'll like go to that space. It's like I like to use that as a feeling space. It feels like a corner. It feels really cozy. And I'll go into that space and I'll sit and I'll put kind of like my head in my knees and I'll let the feeling move through me. And then when I feel like it's kind of transmuted, I'll look up and look around, and then I will start to laugh.
Hmm.
Because I realize that when I feel what I feel, when I feel it, I can have what I have when I have it. And the having what I have literally brings me to a place of delight. It's like
Yeah.
this laughter and also humor. Like, oh my gosh, was I just sitting on the floor with my head in my knees? There's just something so humorous about the fullest expression of that feeling. So, yes.
Yes. Wow. Love it. Love it. And it's so nice to be with what we have because when we're with what we have, we really get to receive the joy that is present in all of our lives in some way or another. What we seek for is what we find. And when we're searching for the beauty and the joy and the delight, it is really what the experience that we have. And I feel like joy, when you like lean into it, it could take you to a space that is elated and almost transcendent beyond this world. When you lean into it, like you were saying, when you feel the feeling and it passes through you, joy also has that characteristic. And I remember this time my mom and I were at a wedding, and the joy was all consuming. It was like we were filled to the top. I was overflowing. The joy was so elated. It was wild. I don't think I've ever felt that intensity of joy. And when we were dancing with hands clasped and pulling in towards each other and pulling out. And as we pulled out from each other, because of like the enthusiasm and the excitement and the expression of joy coming through us, we were actually like kind of floating for that second. Like the way the physics was working was like as we pulled out from each other, we kind of lifted each other up for a couple of seconds there and came back, and tears were streaming down our face, and it was beyond words. It was beyond expression through the words that I can say, because that would limit the experience that we were actually having together in this moment. And there was something there. There's a Jewish saying that says joy breaks all bounds,
Yes.
all boundaries. And I really felt like we were in that embodiment where something in this moment, which I can't describe with words because it's beyond that, was happening in our energetic togetherness in this moment. And it felt like this is the transcendence. This is the beyond that breaks the bounds of the limitations that we believe in that hold us captive.
Yes.
This feeling is the beyond feeling that we're in right now, which I can't describe to you. I could just tell you that in it, it feels like the ultimate freedom and possibility for anything, because
Yes.
it's just this, and it feels like flying, because when we danced, we there was something in the energy that lifted each other up, like we were actually flying for that second when we pulled away, and it was like, whoa, like, so there's something about it. There's something about like leaning in and allowing ourselves to feel all feelings that take us all the way till the end in that 90 seconds. And probably it lasted 90 seconds, probably. Maybe it was a couple seconds more, but the feeling to allow ourselves to go to the very end of the joyous feeling was like nothing I've ever experienced before.
Yes. And if someone's listening to this and they feel a yearning, I know that that exists somewhere in consciousness, but I don't know that I've ever experienced something like that. Then I really encourage you to explore two things: expression and inhibition. And I'll explain what I mean. Depression is the experience of a repression of life force energy. Depression, in the way that I define it and in the way that I've really, really deeply understand it inside of myself, is that there's something that's not being expressed. There's something that's being repressed, suppressed, pushed down. And when we can allow that to come up and out, there's more space for releasing inhibition. And the other thing is, what kind of culture do we grow up in, right? Do we grow up in a constricted culture where we feel constricted in our bodies, where we feel constricted or confined by rules, where we feel self conscious, where we feel judged to be free, to be expressive, to live a more interesting life, to choose our own choices? That could really be a repressor in many ways of joy,
Mm.
because we're all supposed to live our own unique lives and express ourselves in our own unique ways that Hashem, God, gave us to express ourselves. And when we're repressed, expression is repressed. And I read this quote somewhere that said, in shamanic societies, when someone was like sad or ill, even physically or emotionally, they used to ask, when did they stop singing? When did they stop dancing? When
Mm.
did they stop creating? And In some of our societies, our parents or grandparents, because of trauma, stopped singing, stopped dancing, stopped creating way before we were born, maybe even generational wise. So if you're looking for the kind of healing that can help you release your expression, things like somatic healing, things like breath work, things like art, writing, journaling, dancing, those are all really great avenues to explore, to be able to get back into your body, to be able to move through and get through your inhibitions. And I promise you it's possible. Your desire will lead you to where you want to go, no matter how, on what layer or level of constriction you might feel right now. And I think that that's something really, really, really important to share.
Yeah,
Um,
because I feel like I know like what resonates for me the most is being in the act of creating. Nothing gets me more alivened than the experience of creating. And if you're feeling, sometimes when you're thinking about it, it's like, to like go and do a thing, you know?
yeah.
But it's like as soon as you lean into the space, that's it. You're like the fire starts to bubble up inside of you, and all of the ideas start flooding in, and so much wants to come to light. And it's like allow yourself to entertain the idea. I think that sometimes we don't even allow ourselves to entertain the idea because of the restrictions that we have that we're like, I don't have time for that. The thing that's popping up in front of us, we keep like whacking it, hoping it's just gonna go away, but it's just gonna pop up somewhere else because it's asking to be vital. It's asking to come to life. And when we lean into that voice or that whisper or whatever that is, and we start, there's no turning back. It's
Yeah.
like, that's it, man. You lean in and then you're overtaken by the wave of what wants to come through. And joy comes with that because we feel so good when we're in soul alignment and our creative expression. And it could be many different things. Like right now, I'm working on a Purim costume, and where I'm sitting, it's in my vision right across from me. And like, I cannot wait to get my hands dirty and get in it. It's like sitting there waiting for me to, get into it. There's something that is so alivening and joyous, and the vitality that comes to life in allowing it. And then it has a life of its own almost. Like you're just taken into life, and now you're growing and blossoming and flowing, and things are just coming through, and you're like, oh my God, I didn't even know I had this in me. This is crazy. But because we let ourselves entertain the whisper,
Yeah.
the thought.
And there's a real, I think what you're touching on is like the joy in allowing our inner artist and our creativity to express itself, and also wanting to presence. Like there are some people listening to this, I'm sure, that don't even relate or recognize the artist or the creative in them. They might even feel like they don't have it, and they might even feel like they don't want it. They're like, oh, that's for Hani, or that's for that person. And I feel like for them, sometimes they have to start from even more primary places, like coming back into our bodies, right? And there's a practice for that, which I learned in somatic experiencing, where literally you're in the shower or you're in your bed or wherever it is, where you just touch each part of your body and you can just greet it like, hello, head, hello, shoulders, hello, fingers, because some of us are so disconnected from our bodies that we cannot find the energy of life force in it because we're not actually in it. So when we can first go through the process of reconnecting with our bodies, making that connect more with our souls, with our soul, then the soul aligned creativity, artist, excitement, it follows naturally. If we return to our body's natural order and rhythm and start to create those connections from the inside. And I also want to honor that trauma creates often a disembodied experience. The word that we use is like fragmentation. It creates a certain, in some way, shattering of a vessel. an experience of a feeling of the shattering of the vessel, where some people who went through different kinds of trauma don't feel safe to be in their bodies. Sometimes trauma could also be growing up in a society that's very constricted, confined, judgmental. Like that can also be a real traumatic experience for the soul, and a real fragmentation for a soul that just wants to like play and fly and evolve and feel joy. So really presencing that can sometimes also be really healing. Like knowing that that was something that was fragmenting can already start building the synapses, can start connecting to build more wholeness just by the awareness of that in and of itself.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful. Yeah, it's definitely, what I'm understanding in this conversation is that joy is actually sensitive
yeah,
because in some ways it seems like just choose not to suffer and then you'll be in the space of joy. But that's not necessarily true because of everybody's personal life experience and what they've been through and the disassociated life experience that many of us are in because of whatever we've been through. And I feel that and I resonate with that in other ways. He has it show up in somewhere else. And in a way, my creativity could sometimes be a distraction from the thing that I'm disassociating with. And this is the way that I find the way to run away from something else.
totally.
Everything can be so many different things for each person in their own expression. So,
And we
yeah,
spoke about that last week in Unmasking Illusions, right? Like how certain defenses that look a certain way can be a different experience, can show up as a different experience also.
yeah. And I guess the expression of joy is also a different experience for each person in the way that they choose to have it for themselves because we're going to have what we have, but we all have something different. And so the experience of what that joy looks like. And for one person, it could be like cuddling on the couch with their kid. And for one person, it could be like dancing on the stage and like singing a solo in a choir because there's something in that is so vital for them. And so I think there's something so beautiful in, I guess what I'm thinking about is the sensitivity towards what the outward expression looks like in relationship to what that feels like
Yeah.
inside of you. Because it's so much less about how it looks on the outside or how it's perceived on the outside. And it's so much more about how it's actually feeling inside of in your own nervous system, in your own experience, in your own experience of that joyous feeling. And some people are joyous in a more quiet way, and some people are joyous by cackling and slapping their knee, which is one of the expressions that I like to experience in my joy. But it's like it doesn't take away from it. It doesn't have to look like anything in particular, but to allow yourself the experience of however it's showing up inside of you.
Yes, and I think there's something so important about what you said before about disassociation and reassociation. I think that the most deepest experience of joy is reassociating with our essence when it became fragmented, and choosing joy is choosing to reassociate,
Mm.
choosing to be present, choosing to see what's there that maybe isn't quite so joyous. Choosing joy is choosing to recognize that joy is an internal experience and much less of a outward experience. But when we feel it inside, it overflows on the outside in whatever way that our soul's flavor chooses to express it. And joy is also expression. So in choosing joy, it's choosing to learn how to reassociate so that we can express ourselves. And I am choosing in some way to be alive because there's something about joy. There's something about joy that's connected and tethered to our aliveness itself. And I think that that's the deepest form of joy.
Yeah, and then I think that it's also contagious. There's
Mm,
something about joy that's also contagious. Like I'm walking down the street and I see someone having a quiet smile with themselves, and there's something in it that's undeniably joyous, and I can't help but feel like something inside of me is ignited. And now I'm walking with that smile, with that quiet smile on my face, and someone else recognizes it, and then they receive that. And there's something in the experience of joy that generates joy. And it makes me think about what is my environment and who are the people in my cohort and who are the people I surround myself with? Who do I work with in my work environment where I spend most of my day? Because joy is not only contagious, but it's very impactful on our nervous system and how we feel and what's going on. And so I remember when I was doing event production and I went to this venue where I actually felt violated by being there because I felt like no one asked me if I was okay to be subject to this kind of behavior towards other people. The way that the people that were working there were being treated was such mistreatment. I felt so uncomfortable in my own being there because I felt like I was seeing something that I should be preventing from happening because it's like what's going on here? And I made an oath to myself in that moment. I was like, I am never coming back to work at this venue again. I will not subject myself to this kind of energy. And I was only there for one afternoon, but these people work at this venue day in and day out. And I can only imagine how that starts to eat away at you.
Yeah.
And the contrast to that is being in an environment that is joyous and happy and positive and optimistic and encouraging and validating and recognizing. What a healthy environment to be in. What a beautiful place to thrive, pursue the things and to grow in what you contribute to the company, to society, to the world.
Yeah.
And those are choices. Those are choices towards joy also, because my environment plays such a deep role in my overall experience and my overall energy. And if I am sensing that like I'm being mistreated or I'm not, or I'm coming home so depleted at the end of the day, this is places where I get to be curious about, well, maybe there's something else here. Maybe I can choose something differently for myself.
Yes. Yes. And I think a formula for that is like recognizing that a place that I'm choosing joy acknowledges and allows for pain, but doesn't put suffering on its environment or on itself. And we spoke about this in one of our podcasts, but pain is pain, right? Like people go through difficult experiences. They stub their toe, they, God forbid, lose a family member, there's death, there's war, there's persecution, there's sadness, there's trauma in the world, right? Acknowledgement of pain does not take away from joy. And I think the a true fullness of joy is feeling and acknowledging all flavors of life in all environments, in work environments, in home environments. But suffering is the thoughts and the feelings that we have about the pain that makes us either act in sometimes abusive and violating ways towards ourselves or others.
Yeah.
And those are cultures in which there's a feeling that isn't thriving. And the reason for suffering is because we don't really know as a society yet. We're learning, or rather, I'd like to say we're learning how to acknowledge and be with pain. Because if we can, then we can really feel the truest essence of what joy and presence really is, because presence is being with what is when it is, so that we can have what we have when we have it. And I think that that's super, super, super important distinction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So many choices we could be making.
So many choices. And talking about choices,
Mm-hmm.
I would love to share a story with you about choosing life. This is a story about a near death experience in which I have had a few in my life. God has blessed me with all kinds of experiences to be able to work with all kinds of people, I believe, and also to work through all kinds of things. This one happened, I think I get a little short of breath when I share this story because I was short of breath then. So there's something that happens in my body. So I will speak slowly. But this one happened around, I think it's around 5 years, just
Wow.
about. My grandmother, who were coming on to her fifth year site, her fifth anniversary of her death, passed away from COVID. And I got pretty sick. I think it might have been even at the funeral, even though we didn't really go near anyone, but I got pretty sick. And it was the week of Shiva, which is the 7 days where the family members of the person who passed sit in grief in the Jewish tradition. And I was feeling really, really, really sick. And I just pushed through. I had to help out some of my family members and just make things happen. And I just kind of didn't think much about my body at the time. And I felt pretty short of breath and I felt pretty sick and I was pretty feverish and those kind of things. And then around like 7 days after I first started to not feel well, Hatsala, which is like an ambulance corp in where I live, came and checked my blood pressure and my oxygen levels, and they were a bit off. So they gave me oxygen to monitor and on my finger, like a pulse ox to monitor everything that was going on. And I went to bed for a bit. And I asked the Hatsala member that day, I said, what if I stop breathing while I sleep?
Hmm.
Now, the reason why I asked that question is because at that time I had already learned how to differentiate a deep gut feeling from a anxiety.
Mm.
And I had a deep gut feeling. And I was like, "Oh gosh, like that is a gut feeling." And he like kind of laughed and he said, "If you stop breathing while you sleep, you'll wake up. Don't worry about it." So it was a Friday night. And I went to bed, put my phone near my bed, call someone if I wake up. And in the middle of the night, I woke up gasping for air, like
Mm.
gasping for air. And I saw my pulse ox go down, like the oxygen was dropping. And I saw it happen on my finger, and I couldn't do anything. And I watched my soul leave my body. I watched myself leave my body and I kind of was watching my body from above my body.
Mm.
And as I watched my body, I started to feel what it feels like to be in that liminal space, like a real experience of what it feels like to be in that place in between, right?
Wow.
Like we all have these experiences in our life where it's like we're in between where we are and where we want to be. We're in a conundrum, we're in a space between, we're in this unknown space. And I felt what it felt like so in on a soul level, on a visceral level, on every level. And then I felt also at the same time as I felt that, I started to see almost like you're scrolling through Instagram reels. I started to see all the experiences in my life which were difficult.
Mm.
Traumatic experiences, difficult experiences, painful experiences. And I started to see it almost like flashing through one by one. And I was experiencing what I was seeing. It's difficult to explain what it in words, the wordless, similar to how it's difficult to explain the deep essence of joy, right? It's like where that was is a place beyond words. And I also, at the same time as experiencing that deepest pains, I also experienced the feeling of what it feels like when people describe like Shamayim or Shekhinah, which means like heaven or the essence of God or the loving consciousness that is. And I
Wow.
experienced both of these things at the same time. And though it's difficult to explain in words, I try to give it over that experience inside of my energetic um, experience every day of my life because it's something that is so transcendent and beautiful and otherworldly.
Wow.
And I was in this place, I don't know how long because I don't know if there's really time in this space. But after some time, I heard this voice. It sounded like it was coming from like close but far, and it was like a very penetrative voice in my it sounded like it was on a loudspeaker. It might have been in my psyche. It was definitely in my spirit. And it said, Rivky, do you want to be alive? And there is not necessarily thought in the realm that I was in as well, but in some way I thought about it. It wasn't a quick answer, it was a thought, because I thought about how years prior I felt, you know, repression slash depression. And I don't know how alive I felt in those times or how much I want it to be. And I suddenly felt this choice come over me or come through me or come from me. And I felt this vitality, this like energy enter through the crown of my head and rush through my body. And there was this full body, yes, I want to be alive. I
Mm.
want to learn how to fully live while I'm alive. And I'd already been on a journey of embodiment, and an expression and aliveness for some time, but there was something deeper that I was asking for, that was being asked of me, that was being asked through me. And in that space, I watched the pulse ox rise, the oxygen level rise until it was back in the 90s, perfect levels. And I closed my eyes, and if you know me well, this is probably typical fashion of me, and I just went back to sleep. And I didn't tell anyone the story
Wow.
for a while. Didn't tell anyone the story. And then one day I was asked to give a speech on Zoom, to a workshop slash speech on Zoom to around 100 Rebbitzins. A Rebbitzin is usually like a wife of a Torah scholar or a rabbi. And if you know me, I'm not a Rebbitzin. In some ways, I maybe am, but not in the ways in which I grew up to understand Rebbitzins to be. And I was asked to talk about my work and to talk about healing and consciousness and somatic healing and developmental therapy and all kinds of things. And I was talking to my friend Folly Klein and about what I'm going to speak about. And I told her the story.
Wow.
And she's like, Rivky, gotta share that story. I'm like, really? She's like, you actually have to. And I said, okay. So I'm going to share the story. But I really wanted to say some Torah. And I'm thinking about what is a Devar Torah, which is the word to describe like a s- you know, some words of Torah that we share with one another. And I thought about the prayer of Moda'ani, which is a Jewish prayer that we say in the morning. And we say, thank you, Hashem, thank you, God, for returning our soul to us, for returning our soul to our body. How faithful you are. That's the prayer. And it's a beautiful prayer of start and a beautiful tradition of starting the morning with gratitude. And I thought about how, if we really believe, which I do, that we have a piece of Hashem, a piece of source, a piece of the universe, a piece of God inside of us, then in many ways, we don't need a near death experience like this to choose life. We actually choose life every single day. So when we thank God for choosing to return our soul, what we're also doing on a truthiest truth, deeper level, is thanking ourselves for choosing to be alive today. So, my offering to everyone listening to this, and remember, joy is just in the micro tweaks that we create. Whether you're Jewish or not Jewish, look up the Moja Ani prayer. And when you say that prayer, say it from a place of thanking God, the universe, and also the peace of God, your neshama, your soul, the universe that's inside of you for choosing to be alive. Because
Mm.
the greatest joy is orienting toward our choice. And the greatest release from suffering, where we feel like a victim of our life, is reclaiming our power and our choice on deeper and deeper levels every single day.
Wow. I don't, wow. I think that's the first time I fully heard that story. I am so inspired and also taken aback, and to be so close to death consciousness that offers such a gorgeous contrast towards the preciousness of life and choosing life. And I just love when you said, like, yes, I want your conviction towards a life that is alive, that
Yeah.
not just being, not just having a beating heart, but having a beating life where life is generative and alive and impactful and beautiful. And I don't know you from that long ago. I know you
Yeah.
more recently than 5 years. And I witness you in your alive life. This is the way I know you. I don't know you a time before this time. And definitely in being your friend and witnessing you in your life experience, I learn aliveness from you. I watch you in the ways that you choose to navigate and the way you choose joy and the way you choose the more interesting life. And I watch you in your excitement in creating art and your breathlessness that comes over you and the way it pours out of you in this like wild, beautiful way. And it's just it what a beautiful story. I mean, also kind of crazy story, not gonna lie. I was like, whoa, that's I can't even imagine. And the irony of you're like, all right, I'll just go back to sleep now. Okay, cool. Oh, cool. Just a quick out of body experience where I just like learned about everything in the entire universe. Okay, cool. Roll over.
Doesn't that sound like my life though? That's what
Checks
happens.
out. Checks
Checks
out.
out. Yeah.
But
And
but
and
just
it's
like but you are a living example of making the choice to say yes and really constantly like we life is constantly being recreated, and every moment we are faced with a choice, and every moment you are choosing to be in this frequency, to be in this aliveness, to choose in the way that you live your life. And I mean, as your friend, it's deeply inspiring to me, and to also touch the possibility of the universe by seeing it firsthand,
yeah.
like there's the idea of a possibility in the universe, and then there's witnessing the possibility in the universe that really makes it so much more tangible to actually implement into my own life experience. And I'm sure many others who have the privilege and opportunity to be in your sphere and in your circles. And wow, and what a beautiful, just what a inspiring and beautiful, beautiful way. And to have learned it, to have touched that place in the world is beyond time and space.
Yes.
Wow.
And I want to respond to two things that you just said. One is that my life did not change the next day.
Mm,
I didn't I didn't wake up the next morning feeling so different than I did the day before. It
mm,
took me, I got an imprint in my system, in my soul of the choice. So in that way, everything was transformed. But it wasn't the choice that I received, it was the consciousness of the choice, which we can have with or without that experience. But then it takes work to get us from the place of consciousness and awareness to the place of actual actualization of the thing that we are aware of. And that I'm going to be working towards for the rest of my life. But
yeah.
even the amount of aliveness that I have now, which I will agree is so abundant, is also took work to be here. It took commitment to aliveness. It took commitment to choice. It took commitment to remembering the choice, because even in that, if you can believe it, like even in that strong choice, I still sometimes forgot,
Right.
because forgetting and remembering is a part of our experience here.
Yeah.
And the
Yes.
other thing I wanted to say is that you are such a mirror to me, Khan, because I learned the same thing from you.
Mm.
And I think that that's really important for me to say because it's true. And I'm so grateful that you learned that from me and I learned that from you. And I think that that's why we make a good partnership in this podcast and in all the other ventures and adventures that we have, because we actually could really egg each other on in terms of aliveness and ideas and excitement and adventure. But it's so inspiring to be in adventure with like-minded souls. And this is also why choosing the people we surround ourselves with to the best of our ability, because family members aren't always, a choice in some ways. Some ways everything's a choice and our perspective is a choice. And then in some ways, just holding both truths, and in some ways it isn't. And holding both of those things. But also, what I experienced was an experience of also death consciousness, which actually in Jewish culture is very, very, very present and celebrated. And that we do believe in life after death. And we do believe that we're supported by the people who are not here any longer. And we do even have a process of grieving and mourning for 3 days and then 7 days. And then after 30 days, and then each year commemorating and coming back to death consciousness, which in some way, a culture that honors death allows for more fulfilled living and allows for more aliveness because it honors the feelings that
Mhm.
are. And we can do that again without having near death experiences. We can do that by recognizing that in some ways, every single waking moment is a miracle. It's a miracle we're here. And in some ways, and one truth and one perspective and one way of looking at the world, every moment is a near death experience. Something is breathing into us life force, energy that is sustaining us beyond anything that we can comprehend with our conscious mind. And whether we live a life of fear or whether we choose to live an interesting life, life comes along with an inherent risk. And there's something about living right inside of the tension and the adventure and the joy and the pain of that gives us the most connection to our humanity, which really gives us the most connection and access to the joy that we can possibly have.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love how sometimes it feels like the most complex thing, but really it's also just coming back to the simplest, most foundational thing, which is the breath.
Mm,
This breath, this moment, this intake, which is the new choice in this new life where I'm being reborn yet again with this next fresh breath of air that's coming inside of me, because the other option is that the breath will not arrive and then my time will be up and I won't have this opportunity anymore. So like that death consciousness just makes this moment so charged with life.
yes.
This breath that I'm going to take in, what are the choices I'm going to make with this breath? What is the perspective that I'm going to choose to receive this world with? What choices am I going to make that's going to allow more joy, more excitement, more love, more aliveness, more vitality into my life experience, more presence, more allowing, just all of that. It's like all of those are our choices, and each breath is touching that new life
Yes.
that is this moment. So cool.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
As a parent, and you already gave one example of the clapping.
Yeah.
Like, what are some ways to practically help our children shift their embodiment to a more joyful, present experience? What are some practices that you use in parenting?
It's a really good question. I mean, gratitude is a beautiful practice and it is exactly what it sounds like, a practice. It's also not something that comes natural for us to be in gratitude. So, when things are frustrating or upsetting, it's an opportunity to notice so many other things that there are to be grateful for, to contrast this moment in relationship to so much else. This is a crappy moment. It's true. And we can feel this crappy moment. And at the same time, let's look at all the other beautiful things that are present here for you right now. So that while you're in this experience of something that's a little bit like down and like not so great, I don't lose track of how much goodness is here, how much there is to be grateful for. And also humor. Humor is humor always helps shift energy. And so, yes, there is a certain amount of time to give to the feeling that's present so that we don't gaslight or bypass that feeling. And once you gave it that space, now we can shift out of it. We can shift
Yes.
out of it by cracking a joke, by being silly, by helping them notice something else because ultimately they don't really want to be in that crappy space for too long either, right?
Right.
So, and it needs the attention that it deserves 100%, but we don't have to like mope and stay there for forever. We can give it
Yeah.
the moment that it needs, and then we can shift energy by noticing something different, making a joke, having fun, and I think that children are so much more willing to lean into that space because they really do want to have fun. They don't want to be in the crappy mood for long. And so when there's an invitation to that possibility, they're like, yeah, we're joining that bandwagon. Way better than being in this crappy mood. So the invitation to the possibility of seeing something differently, of adding humor, all those things, they're ready for it, much readier than we would be as adults. So I
I
think that
love
that
that.
really helps. Yeah.
I also feel like in our healing journeys in general, and like I'll use the word healing journeys with like quotation marks because it's like sometimes the words are so overused that it's like the healing journey. But but in the journey of healing and growth and transcendence into spaces that are the possibility in the universe, I find that sometimes a place where people get stuck in is that there's not enough humor. And when they discover all the things to be conscious about, it brings them into more suffering. And this journey is not about that.
Mhm.
And if
Yeah.
it's bringing you into spaces of more negativity, then we need to attune to something else. Like getting out of our minds and into our bodies is a really great thing to do. Getting outside, switching up the energy, clapping your hands, sighing, taking a shower, not thinking so much. I think that sometimes even in parenting, like people take things to the other extreme. They want to validate their kids so much that they're sitting with their kid in the tantrum for 3 hours, not recognizing that their child also needs them to help shift,
Yeah.
not only validate. And of course, we need to swing the pendulum because it used to be that people are like, you're sad, I'll give you a thing to be sad about, or here's a lollipop, shut you up. So obviously we need to swing the pendulum a bit and validate and sit with and not bypass and not gaslight, like you said. But also, it's really important to remember that it's much more about us modeling the way that we are to our children. And it's about truthful, authentic parenting than trying to follow a therapy model of something that a therapist once told us, because that usually leads to less joy and more intense. I don't even know what to call that. And I also want to talk about the power of going outside.
Yes.
Going outside, going outside, going outside. I had a body worker once that I went to a long time ago, like quite a long time ago, and he did this session with me of like emotional release and these kinds of things. And I texted him the next day and I said, I'm feeling so emotionally like sensitive and tender and like a bit overwhelmed. And he told me, he said, go outside. Where are you? I said, I'm at work. I was working at a clinic at the time with kids. He said, go outside. I said, okay. It was my lunch break. I went outside. He said, look at the sky. I said, okay. He hung up the phone. Sitting there looking at the sky. And that was one of the biggest lessons I've ever learned in my life. And then he called me back 3 minutes later and he said, go into your phone. And I said, okay. And he said, go find someone in your contacts who needs more help than you. And
Mm.
I said, okay. And he said, call them. And that was the second biggest lesson I learned in my life. One of the second biggest lessons I've learned in my life, because because what I found to be so important about that is the world is so much larger than my tunnel vision. The world is so much larger than my problems. And not in a way of like, I need to now help people to, as a defense mechanism against feeling my own pain. Not like that. Let's not take this out of context,
Context. Yeah.
It was just like Sometimes it's good to look at the sky, switch things up, come out of these intense conversations of analyzing ourselves and trying to fix it all now, and recognize that this life is a beautiful journey of being with unknown, being with indecision, being with confusion, being with pain, and being with joy, and being able to come out of the tunnel vision of whatever it is, the scroll on my phone, like you we got to get outside. The healing elements of nature, of water, of sun, of wind, of the earth is so, so, so powerful. And when we return, when we get closer to nature, we get closer to ourself, to our essence, which is joy.
Yes. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. I know in one of the books that Johan Hari wrote, I don't remember which one exactly, but it was talking about the idea of depression. And the question was when was the last time you were outside in nature? And how important and how crucial nature is to our well-being, mind, body, and spirit. And it's like when we're taking that new breath of life, take it outside, take that fresh air into your body, bring the joy inside of yourself, make the choice to be in nature, to be outside, to allow it to replenish and revitalize ourselves so that we can make the choices that are allowing us to have such a joyous life experience.
Yeah.
It really sometimes seems so complicated, but actually sometimes it's the simpler things that really offer us the most, like fresh air, like
Yes.
fresh air. Yes.
We're talking about simple things today, and I feel like realignment is always simple and joy is simple, and it's not as complicated. And I feel like in so many ways are the environments that we live in complicated things. And we need to, send our child to school to sit in the desk for 8 hours a day and give them Ritalin so that they could sit in the desk, and then send them to a nutritionist because they're not hungry when they have the Ritalin all day, so that they're eating too much or too little at night. So then they're eating foods that aren't good for them because their body's lacking nutrients. So then they need an antidepressant and a melatonin, and right, it's like the compensation for the compensation for the compensation for the
Mm.
compensation for something that is not natural. And when
Yeah.
we return to our naturalness, which means to our real feelings, to our real joy, to our real grief, to our the elements that are all around us, to the soul inside of us, joy comes easily. Realignment of our vessel comes easily. And when we put what we put inside of us is in many ways who we are. Thinking about having a clear vessel for joy, like food, prayer, thoughts of light. What are we feeding on? Not just nutritiously, but also what are we feeding on? What are we feeding? What thought processes are we feeding? And I want to bless us all with really being able to do what is in the energy of this month, which is Purim, which is a holiday of joy for the Jewish people. And a big premise of Purim is these words, vinahapachu, which literally means turning that thing upside down. Turn that upside down. And there's something so joyous and delightful about this idea that these simple acts of singing, of clapping, of moving, of nature, of realigning our thoughts a little bit differently, of coming into our body, of creating, that can actually turn everything, the decree, quote unquote, of what we think is possible for us upside down, to open ourselves up to the possibilities of this entire universe. And I was at a wedding, one of the most beautiful weddings I've ever been to this year, my friend's wedding. She waited a long time to find the person that she was going to marry, and it was a transcendent, gorgeous wedding. We were under the chuppah, which is the wedding ceremony, and it was this serious, beautiful ceremony with gorgeous songs of that were joyous and melancholy and all the way in between. And suddenly, the rabbi started to sing and dance the song that is for Purim. Which it was not Purim time, and he started to sing "V'nahapach, v'nahapach, 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 v'nahapachu," and it was like the most funny, first of all, and delightful and random moment where he like really presents the energy of that, whatever that was that they were like living inside of in the search for the thing that they desired. It completely got turned on its head in a way that was
Mm,
fully revealed why they had to wait this long to find each other, and fully transcendent and fully joyous. And like that frequency that he took us into was so delightful. And sometimes when I try to think about like the possibilities of the universe that are beyond what my mind could comprehend, I go into meditation and I go back to that moment where he
mm,
sang that song and took us into the frequency of something could shift beyond our wildest dreams if we orient towards that possibility of that can actually turn right upside down. So,
wow, I love
yeah.
that. I love that.
So I
Wow.
want to end with a prayer for all of us
Yes.
of revealed good, and for us to believe with certainty in the possibility of vina hapoch, who turning turning whatever we believe our inner or outer degree is upside down through joy, through prayer. And yesterday we had a ceremony in my home. It was a medicine without medicine ceremony where we went to a psychedelic place without medicine, just with our breath and prayer and hypnosis and energy work. And I told everyone there, I said, we're going to break down the gates of heaven today. But what are the gates of heaven? Often it is our own defenses. The
Mm,
gates of heaven are our own defenses, and we think the gates of heaven are out there, when really the keys to the gates of heaven are our own defenses, our own inhibitions, our own healing that's asking us to be looked at. And so we can break down the gates of heaven through the prayer of embodiment, of stepping into, moving through, breaking through the shackles of our own inhibitions, our own defenses, our own thoughts about ourselves, our own limiting thoughts about life, our own limiting beliefs that were formed by trauma that were not who we are. And I want to say, and maybe you could join me, Khani, in saying, Modeh ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shechazarta bi nishmati v'chemla rabba emunasecha. Thank you, Hashem, and thank you to my soul, to your soul, to each of the souls listening to this, because you're on our frequency, guys,
oh yeah.
for choosing to be alive today and every day, to bring your flavor of transcendent light and beauty and pain and love to the world, and to make the world a more whole and beautiful place. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much. Gorgeous, Rivky. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
See you all next
See
time.
y'all next time.
Bye.
Yes.